guys, thank you so much for joining Ace Your Health podcast. My name is Ace Choksy. This is Kaylee Kuzer. Thank you so much for joining us. She's one of our nutritionists. She is the expert in nutrition that we have. All of us are nutritionists from some degree, but she's the expert at it. But so we've been talking about nutrition for a while, and you guys have poured in some questions and comments and asked us many things. So today we're going to continue that conversation. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for joining us again. Yeah. So, a lot of us have wondered about, plant-based diet and animal-based diet and different types of proteins and things that get in. And the hot topic, Tom Brady brought it up to some degree because he's famous for it. But, lectins, and they're in legumes and pulses and beans, and then we have these phytates, which are another name for that is phytic acid. Well, they interchange, and then so when we look at those things, these are hot buzzwords in the world of plant-based medicine.
Yeah.
And we plant-based medicine is one of our major go-to tools to help people reverse their chronic conditions. And that's the topic of today, phytates and lectins. So if you guys have any questions, let us know. But we're going to delve into few aspects of this and how do we make it easier for our day-to-day life. How do we incorporate and how do we exclude these things into our life without having any side effects. And we're going to share some perspectives on how we do it. So yeah, what do you think about that?
So a lot of people know that beans are nutritious. That's no secret. They're super rich in potassium and fiber and plant-based protein. But a big concern that you get from a lot of people is that it makes them bloated or makes them gassy, and it causes a lot of digestive discomfort. And people obviously don't want that, especially when you're eating a plant-based diet. You're already eating so much fiber, and so bloating tends to be a thing that a lot of people are dealing with. So I wanted to talk today a little bit about phytates and lectins because those are going to be the big players behind those effects that you get from legumes, from beans, from lentils, and stuff like that. So I guess to kind of start off, phytates or phytic acid.
Yeah, what are they?
It's basically a phosphate ester of inositol. So you can break that down if you want in
we'll
layman's terms.
So when you look at a phytic acid, and when we talk about phosphate esters, what does that actually mean? So anytime when we have esters, there are carbon chains bound to a phosphate with a bunch of oxygen, and they bind with each other. And when we're talking about inositol, if you Google phytic acid and phytate, it'll give you a 6-ring structure, or I think it's 6-ring, and then it has lots of phosphate and oxygen all over the place, and with some hydrogen and some hydroxyl ion. So in the most layman's term, this guy is full of oxygen molecules. Now, this is the type of oxygen molecule that's bound to a hydrogen without having another hydrogen there. It's bound to phosphate without having another proton donor there. So this little guy will go into your body, and when it gets broken down, it's like releasing bunch of oxidative stress, oxygen radicals all over the place.
Right.
So that's what that is. Yeah.
Exactly, and because it's basically unpaired.
Unpaired.
Yep. It has a strong affinity for binding to some dietary minerals. So like iron, calcium, zinc, magnesium,
which are all positively charged.
Yep.
They all have extra.
Yep. So they're offering
protons,
up their extra proton, and it's hooking onto them. But what that's going to do in your body is that can actually, over time, if you're eating a lot of phytates, it can cause like nutrient deficiency because it's basically sweeping those out with it. Yeah. So that can be a big danger when you're not, we'll get into kind of what you can do about it, but that can be a big danger if you're eating, for one example, canned beans. In general, they're not cooked and prepared in the right way, so they're going to be higher in those lectins and phytates. But another big issue is undercooked beans because they're not fully deactivated.
What are lectins? We talked about phytates a little bit.
Yeah.
What are lectins?
Yeah, so lectins
Just general definitions. Let's cover them.
They're basically proteins that bind to carbohydrates.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to explain how they do that a little bit, you're always so much better at explaining it in the technical terms than I am.
Yeah, lectins are another different types of, to some degree, they are similar to proteins, and they can be even considered amino acid sequences or enzymatic sequences that bind to other carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are carbon chains, and they have mostly hydrogens and carbons and very very few oxygens sometimes. So when you want things to bind to it, these guys will bind. And what does that mean? Like, we're made up of 96% carbon, and in order for our body to do anything, we need to transport this carbon from one place to another. And when you have things like lectins, it will bind to it, hold it for itself, and won't let go for you. So this is like the currency in your body. And whenever something is positively charged, it usually means that it has two or one or two or three less electrons rather than extra protons. But it can have protons, right? Protons that come from hydrogen ions. So that's something that we can look at into chemistry world. But that's what lectins do. Lectins will hold your currency to itself and won't allow it. So then your body has to produce a lot more acid, and that acid will destroy the gut bacteria in order to break down lectins. Now you don't have gut bacteria that properly digest food, and then you get gassy and bloated because your other bad bacteria take over.
Right.
And
another thing is, especially in raw or undercooked kidney beans, this is where they tend to be really common. There's a type of lectin called phytohemagglutinin, which is that's a big word, but it can cause your red blood cells to clump together, which is all going to kind of play into the same thing that you were discussing, and it can cause symptoms like nausea and vomiting and general stomach upset. But the more typical symptoms that people experience are bloating and gas. But like you said, bad bacteria are starting to take over, and this can lead to gut permeability in the long term, leaky gut, which we've talked about a little bit. So that can be a major concern as well.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you talk about any agglutinin, the word itself tells you that it's glutenizing something or gelatinizing, basically binding something. So hemagglutinin binding of the red blood cells, and that's what these guys do. Now, in terms of like, just to like go back into the science a little bit, like when you block your currency in your gut, if your gut lining needs the bricks to make the gut wall, well, if something is holding on to those bricks, what's going to happen? You're going to have a wall with holes in it, and that's what we call leaky gut, right? So that's what it does to our body. And you also have to look at it from the energy perspective, where we have these little things, seeds basically, right? They are so densely packed with nutrients, and there's a reason why nature made it that way, because they're trying to protect the treasure that's inside it.
Right. So in nature, it's a great thing for the plant, but when it comes to us eating the plant, it can be a little bit dangerous if we don't know how to prepare it right.
So what do you think about them? Like, we know I'm plant-based. I sometimes have ghee. You are totally vegan. And how do you incorporate these kind of things, whether they're phytates and lectins? What kind of things do we think about when we're incorporating them into our lifestyle?
One of the biggest things to consider is, we've talked about how it can cause nutrient deficiency and stuff like that. In general, though, when you're eating a really varied diet and you're having a huge, because this is another thing we can go into too, probably in another lesson, is how minerals kind of compete for each other. So when I said, that it inhibits the absorption of some minerals, if you're getting plenty of those minerals from other foods and you're only eating, legumes, here and there, it's not really likely to cause a major disruption in your, what your body has nutrient-wise. So the best thing we can do is we can take measures in preparation to reduce the content of phytic acid and lectins so that our body can digest very well and doesn't have to run the risk of developing leaky gut, because that can totally lead to food sensitivities when food particles get through those gaps in the wall that we talked about. But yeah, so soaking is kind of one of the best things that we can do to reduce phytates and lectins. It actually tends to deactivate those from the legumes. At home, I soak for 3 separate 12-hour soaks of beans, but I kind of cook mine in bulk, and then you can cook them and freeze them and stuff like that. But if you're in a hurry, a lot of science has shown that 12 hours is plenty.
So if you cook something that long, does it stink up?
Does it?
I'm asking.
Oh,
you,
I don't cook it that long. So if you
soak it for 36 hours, does that bowl or container start stinking up?
A little bit, yeah. So I separate the water every 12 hours.
Okay.
So it's technically 3 separate 12-hour soaks. But you will notice that the water starts to get a little bubbly and thick as some of those particles kind of get out into the water.
That makes sense. What do you think about fermentation and sprouting?
Fermentation and sprouting are awesome, and what they do is they kind of break open the barrier, I guess, the coating of the beans, which will allow your body to digest better. So it's sort of breaking apart the components that are holding it all and locking it up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's so true. That's interesting. So how does somebody know what has lectins and phytates? Like, how do I know what I need to boil and soak for 36 hours?
So
or 12 hours?
Yeah, in general, for most of your beans, like kidney beans, black beans, pinto beans, stuff like that, those you're going to want to soak for that 12 to 36 hour period. You can even do 24 if you want and feel like you want to go a little extra, but not all the way. Then with lentils, it's a little bit different. You can't really soak them for that long because they'll start to fall apart. So a lot of people recommend just 6 to 8 hours for soaking of lentils before you cook them, or even pressure cooking is a huge thing. I know pressure cooking has been known to help denature those things as well.
That's interesting. So some people say that pressure cooking will destroy the vitamins and minerals and nutrients.
Yep.
So what do you say about that?
So I have heard that. I personally don't pressure cook just because I've seen a lot of controversial research, and I haven't made my total stance on that. So I just stick to what I've done for years, which is soaking and then cooking for a few hours.
That is so interesting. So I have in our house we in our meaning, like in a lot of Indian houses, like it's pressure cooking is normal. Like literally we pulverize all the all the lentils. Like you get their red or yellow dal, and then you pressure cook them, and it's completely pulverized. But that's 1/3 or half of India eats that food, and they live just fine in that sense. But then there's also a lot of boiled and cooked, like really boiled and cooked food. And I think that's where the benefits are coming, because most of these things are boiled for so long.
And that just ties into what I said of, like, as long as you have balance and variety, like, it would be kind of pointless to go all in either way. Having a balance, maybe you eat some things pressure cooked and some things that are boiled, and then you're going to get the different benefits from both. So
that's really interesting. So in terms of when we're looking at all of these things, some people say that they have a certain blood type, and they have a certain type of diet that they have to eat with, for whether it's because we're talking about plant-based, we can look at the opposite and look at animal-based diet. And some people will swear by it, that when they went plant-based, it was the worst thing that they could have done to themselves. So do phytates and lectins have any role in that experience that they've had?
I think that it could, because It seems like when people do that whole disrupt your life and completely change your diet, unsupervised by any healthcare professional, something usually goes wrong. Yeah. And I know for a lot of people, they will eat a lot of beans and grains because they're like, I gotta get my protein, and might not be preparing it right. They might have no idea that you need to soak, or they might not be soaking it long enough. So that definitely could have a role to play, because they would immediately, especially if you're coming off the standard American diet and you switch to a ton of fiber from beans, that in itself can give you some digestive distress, just because your body is adjusting to breaking down more fiber, to processing more of it. And then when you add in the lectins and phytates and that bloating and gassiness, that's why people might say, oh, I felt like crud when I was on a vegan diet. So it's definitely something to be aware of, and that's where education and preparation are all the difference when you're doing a plant-based diet correctly.
Yeah, that's so true, and the whole concept of having everything raw and natural doesn't apply to being vegan, because if you're vegan and completely raw all the time, in this case, if you're having raw vegetables and legumes and lentils and pulses, it can cause some side effects.
Some major side effects.
Major side effects, yeah. So, some things have to be processed. And the easiest rule, 2 years ago when I was in India, I was hanging around with some yogis in some temples and some places. And they said this one thing to me, and that still resonates with me. They said that you look at nature and look at how long it takes for nature to make a grain. Right? If you look at wheat, sometimes it's in a natural sense with non-genetically modified wheat, has a cycle that I think it only grows every 9 months or only in certain type of the year.
Right.
So it takes that long for the crop to fruit. So in nature, certain things have that type of a seasonal or bi-seasonal. If you're in certain type of a season, like in summertime, some fruits will grow. As soon as you take them off, 2 weeks later, the tree will fruit again. Right. And you pluck them again and it will grow again. So that cycle is really fast if the environment is suitable. But same thing for like a lot of these lentils and legumes. Even if the environment is suitable, they don't grow for a long time because it takes months and months for nature to make this. So if something takes a long time in nature to make, it should take that much longer for you to cook and eat. That was the concept.
Makes so much sense. I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
That's awesome. But that does make a lot of sense when you think about it, because even things like lettuce, when you grow that in your garden, you can chop it off one day, and within probably a week you'll have new leaves sprouting back up from it, because it's something that's easy for your body to break down. It's easy to regrow, but it makes so much sense.
So that kind of resonated with me for a long time, and it still does.
Yeah.
And when we do it that way, so I earlier last year, in 2019, I tried to go completely raw, like only boiled, no pressure cooked lentils. Okay. And I did it for 1 month, and my gut was on fire. Every time I had mung beans or dal or anything, I had this massive headache that would follow for 3 to 4 hours to 5 hours. And I used to love these things, and I was eating the salad, having 50% vegetables, and it would totally, and it was totally vegan on top of it. So that was the beautiful part of it. But I felt horrible during that time. And then I just said, no, it has to be pressure cooked. These things, these phytates and lectins, all of these things have to be completely denatured. They have to be broken down because they're some of them are type of proteins that hold on to a lot of other things. So that was my experience. And it'd be pretty cool to find out what your experience was and how, there are a lot of bodybuilders a lot of athletes, like we take care of a lot of professional athletes who are vegan. So, somehow they're doing it and that works perfectly fine. So I wouldn't be afraid of, or I would say don't be afraid of trying something new. And as Kaylee said, you want to do it in a supervised manner until you get used to it. And that's kind of what we do, right? Like
we really hold people's hand while they get used to switching their diet and adjusting to all the changes, finding new ways of cooking and stuff like that, and that makes the process so much easier for people.
And then once they learn how to walk and run, then you let them go.
We let them go. Yep.
So that's so cool. This is such a big topic. It's huge. So what are a few things that they can take away from this conversation? What can they do at home?
So at home, one of my biggest recommendations, like I said earlier, would be to soak your beans. Soak them for 12 hours. If it's lentils, maybe pressure cook them. You seem to have had some great experiences with that. Another thing you can do is add a sheet of kombu seaweed in when you cook your beans. That's what I do at home too.
Nice.
And that helps kind of soak up more of those phytates and lectins and really reduces any side effects that you might have from beans. Like I totally notice the difference if I'm eating out and have something with beans in it compared to if I cooked it at home. I always, without a doubt, notice a huge difference.
So if you add the seaweed in there, what happens to it? Do you filter it out?
Yeah, you pull out the seaweed when it's done cooking, pretty much. It sometimes breaks apart, but it's pretty easy to straighten out. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and then another thing would just be include diversity in your diet. That's something that we stress a lot here. Don't just eat the same things repetitively.
Yeah.
You need, every food has a different nutrient profile, and they're all of benefit to you. So having a wide array of plant foods is how you're going to stay your healthiest.
Yeah, that is so true. Yeah, we have to cycle. I mean, the seasons change, so we should change and match our food according to the seasons. Well, that's our talk for today. We're going to come back with a new topic next week. And, if you have any questions, let us know. Every Fridays, we pray for you. We send out our positive thoughts to you. Today is a Friday, and if you like to join us from wherever you are. That will be great. And do you have any other thing you want to say?
No, I think you wrapped it up pretty well.
Great. All right, guys, like us, subscribe, spread the channel, spread the word, and if you like to join the community as well, it definitely helps to have a lot of people in the community, and you get access to all kind of stuff that makes your life a little bit easier. Take care, guys. Bye.